Hello everyone, and welcome to another edition of 5 Facts. Today we are here to talk about the 1990 miniseries It, done by Tommy Lee Wallace and acted amazingly by our old pal Tim Curry. Now, we're going to dive right into the facts here, but this is a celebration for the new It coming out, but the facts are going to be about that 1990 miniseries and maybe a few things from the book just to clarify things. So, fact number 1, what is It? What is Pennywise? A lot of people think that he's just a demonic clown, but if you go deeper into the books, you realize that Pennywise is more of an eldritch horror from like the old school Lovecraftian cosmic horror sense. The shape-shifting abilities, the fact that it feeds off of fear, all of these are major tropes in like the old Lovecraftian type monsters. And the main thing that shows off this is a Lovecraftian monster is, first off, if you are to see the final form of Pennywise, your brain cannot handle it. That's what you see whenever you see the deadlights, the lights circling in the throat in the new one, or that weird kind of alien-looking lights, and the reason why Bowers ended up going completely pale. Like, that's part of the final form, or that's where the essential spirit of Pennywise, whatever it would actually be called, is. Like, it's part of a much larger, bigger scope than we can imagine type creature that exists in the far reaches of space beyond the actual universe. Stephen King would call this the macroverse. And as we see it, I honestly think that this is probably a genderless thing, although Bill Denborough's girlfriend Audra in the books would go on and say, oh god, it's pregnant, which might mean that this spider thing actually can split off into more and create more of itself, which would be a pretty incredibly terrible thing for the universe, because dairy is bad enough as it is every 27 years when this thing wakes up. But that is essentially what it is an eldritch horror that is far older than our planet, that's far older than anything, and actually came here on kind of like a fragment of a comet that crashed in Maine a long time ago. Kind of a weird origin, but that's the basics of what Pennywise is. Fact number 2, let's talk about Tim Curry and his performance as Pennywise. A lot of people have heard different things about what Tim Curry did on the set for this movie, and a lot of it ended up being true, like the fact that he would go up and actually perform for extras as a clown before people actually knew that that was Tim Curry. They thought the studio had just hired a clown, like specifically for the movie theater scene. He would go up there and he would try to perform, and he would try to keep the people interested so that whenever it actually came time to film, they would be into it. Along with this, he almost didn't take the role as Pennywise because he had finished up a few years prior with the movie Legend from Ridley Scott, where he had been Satan, and the amount of time he spent in a makeup chair was staggering for that movie, and he wasn't really looking forward to that again. So they had him do that, and it was usually about 3 hours a day. But part of the reason why there weren't more prosthetics used, part of the reason why like the makeup is a little bit more vanilla on him, is because they didn't want to put Tim Curry through a whole lot for just tiny bits more here and there. He already, during transitions, whenever they changed the teeth, whenever he became a more vicious version of himself, they had to have him running back and forth to the trailer a lot for more makeup. But he decided he was tough, he went through it, and he also stayed in character most of the time whenever he was on there. So people, when they were filming this, didn't matter if it was the young kids or the adults. Nobody really wanted to hang out with him while he was on set. It wasn't a full character thing, but he definitely was not being the nicest person to be around. He was in that full Pennywise mindset, and he had creeped everybody out. So a lot of times there's just like a picture of him like sitting by himself and things whenever you look at the pre or the post-production shots. It's a fascinating performance and is honestly the best part of this miniseries. As a side note, there were a few other people that almost got it. Malcolm McDowell, who I think would have been an interesting one, and Alice Cooper almost got the role as Pennywise. Alice Cooper would have been pretty metal for that, but that's just me having a bias towards old classic rock. Fact number 3. For a made-for-TV movie, the budget for this was huge. For the 2-part series, they actually were given $12 million, which for 1989 money, that was pretty substantial for any movie of the time. And for a TV movie, it was pretty much unheard of. This allowed them to have better actors. This allowed them to have great special effects for the time. They still ran out towards the end and weren't able to get everything they wanted done, but they were able to have a substantial budget and kind of bring people in like John Ritter and all that gave this movie just a little bit more potency. That would be about $21 million in today's budget. And for comparison, the previous It movie, Part 1, that came out in 2017, cost around $30 million. So for that gap for a TV movie there is about $9 million as far as like total value. And you can tell that with the new one, they were able to get a little more bang for their buck because of the CGI and everything else that went into that. In the 90s, these TV movies would generally be made for $1 million or less, sometimes $2 or $3 million for like a Disney or an A&E type movie. They were very bare bones, and they didn't have the sort of clout that this one did, being on a major network. Fact number 4, the original spider at the end of the film was supposed to be very different. Probably the cheesiest part of this entire movie is that end spider with like the singular eyes that just didn't look right, and like there was a lot that didn't feel right with that giant spider. It didn't feel scary, it felt a little cheesy, and this is something that Tommy Lee Wallace actually talked about in the DVD commentary, that they weren't able to kind of finish the movie the way they wanted to because so much of it was just too cerebral to take from the book and put it into the TV show on the budget they had, but also like the monster didn't turn out quite the way they thought. The original monster they had was a spider, but it was supposed to be a lot bulkier, more reptilian, lots of scales. It was sort of a hybrid creature, and it was definitely more monstrous than it was kind of clowny like this thing was, and not clowny in the way that like Pennywise is a clown, just bad looking. What's weird is that they had a bunch of clay models made, they planned this out, and whenever they opened the boxes from the special effects team in California, they did not get the monster they were expecting. They assembled it, they went with what they had because they were on time constraints, but it just wasn't what they wanted. And that's unfortunate because I think if you were to take care of just this one thing, it would have made the miniseries a lot better. Rumor has it right now that the new monster is much more tentacle-oriented than straight-up spider-oriented, which would bring it back to that traditional Lovecraftian Cthulhu-style horror. Fact number 5, popcorn facts. When I can't find one big fact, we're just going to shotgun a bunch of little ones at you. If you were wondering why the characters kept saying beep beep, this is because Richie just talks too much, and it's a more polite way than telling him to shut up. So when they say beep beep Richie, they're basically being like, okay, quiet down, that's enough. Tommy Lee Wallace did not actually read the book for it. He wanted the script to stand out on his own and wanted it to not be completely kind of dominated by the comparisons to the book. He wanted to make that standalone movie. Afterwards, he would go on and read the book and found that he had not done the job that he wanted to in the adaptation. I think he should have read it beforehand. Even if it did change the way he looked at the script, it might have been a little bit better. Who knows? You may have heard about this weirdness, but in the novel, Beverly has sex with all the other kids in the Losers Club right before they go to face like the final version of it. And this was part of the ritual of Chud. It was supposed to be like a bonding experience. And originally they had planned to put this into Cary Fukunaga's version of the new It movies, and it wasn't going to get added. And they were trying to see if it would fit for this, but Tommy Lee Wallace said that it just didn't ring true for anything here. And honestly, it's one of the weirdest parts of the book, one of my favorite books of all time, but like it was bizarre. And I don't really think it added much to the story, so I'm kind of glad that they're cutting it out from these ones. Also, that is the 13-year-old version of the kids, not the adults. The actor who played young Bill Denborough would end up taking his life at 27 years old because of a flagging career. He was in StarQuest and he was in some other things, but after he'd been cut mostly out of a movie, he just had seen enough. The depression took over, and he ended up taking his own life. That same year, John Ritter would end up dying of a heart attack, and it was just a bad year for the former cast of this movie. The final piece of this, despite having a runtime of well over 3 hours, Pennywise is only featured in the movie for about 20 minutes, and these are the 20 minutes that everybody remembers because it was just that much better than the rest of the movie. Now, it sounds like I'm being pretty negative about the miniseries. I enjoyed it more as a kid. I enjoyed rewatching it recently for this and for the original versus remake we have coming out. But it was a very flawed miniseries, just like most of the adaptations of Stephen King's work. Something about Stephen King's work is much better whenever it's actually just on the page rather than adapted in. Occasionally you'll have a Shawshank Redemption or Green Mile where they just absolutely nail it. But so often it's tricky to adapt and make into something great. And I think that kind of happened here where it fell short. You had great sequences with the young kids that they were better than the adults, I think, as far as making a cohesive story, and it showed that they liked each other, and just all of these, like the chemistry was better there. And while it was decent, it still wasn't quite what I was hoping for with like a series about it, which, as I've talked about, was one of my favorite books. So I'm really hoping that this new one that launches in the next couple days, this part 2, is going to live up to the hype of the book. The first one of this new series was great. Maybe not great, but good, and I'm hoping that this one does. We shall see. I want you guys to tell me about what you thought of the miniseries, though. I want to hear about Tim Curry. I want to hear about your first experiences. Did it freak you out? Did you come upon this way late and decide that it was too cheesy to finish? What did you feel about this? Hit up those comments and please let me know. Otherwise, hit that like button, hit subscribe, and we will be back with more 5 Facts and more other series on the channel. I will talk to you guys very soon.